Hey guys, Jake from 8020 Media here. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to build a 350 wheel horsepower and 400 wheel torque Ford Ranger for all of about $2,000 and just 4 simple bolt-on modifications. The previous Ford Rangers used anywhere from 2.3 liter to 4.0 liter engines, but they all had one thing in common, and that's that they were naturally aspirated. The natural aspiration makes it difficult to add any additional power to any of the old school Ford Rangers without looking at expensive things like forced induction. Fortunately, with the newer 4th gen and 5th gen Ford Rangers, Ford opted to use the 2.3 liter EcoBoost, which is an inline 4, but the good news is that it is turbocharged, and the turbocharged nature makes it extremely easy to add additional power with just a couple bolt-on modifications that aren't very expensive. So in this guide, I'm going to go ahead and talk about those 4 performance modifications, as well as spend a little bit of time talking about the power limits of the 2.3 EcoBoost to let you know how far you can push these engines before you start getting into dangerous territory. So first off, the Ford Ranger is relatively underrated from the factory. The engine produces 270 horsepower and 310 foot-pounds of torque, as rated by Ford. However, when you put one of these stock trucks on a dyno, it actually dynos around 265 to 270 wheel horsepower and about 300 to 310 wheel torque. So the numbers that Ford quotes actually are underrated when you consider most cars nowadays have anywhere from around a 10 to 15% drivetrain loss. So it produces really good power from the factory, especially for a truck of its size, but like I mentioned, just 4 modifications can take that 270 wheel horsepower to about 350 wheel horsepower. Now, you will want to be cautious once you start pushing beyond the 400 wheel torque range. Once you get to around 450 wheel torque, that's when you're at risk of running into some serious internal engine issues. I would say, generally speaking, probably about 425 wheel torque is the safe power limit of the 2.3 EcoBoost. And even at those levels, you do still have some risk of running into some serious issues. But if you keep it around the 400 wheel torque level that these modifications that I discuss will get you to, you should have a pretty safe and pretty reliable Ford Ranger that produces a good bit more power than it does from the factory. If you do want to push things beyond the 425 to 450 wheel torque level, you'll want to start looking at internal upgrades. And so I'm going to save those for a different video just since those are a bit more advanced. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the 4 modifications here. The first one's engine tuning. Engine tuning is where all of your big power gains come from. That's what really helps optimize the engine efficiency. It's also going to help maximize the performance gains from all of the other modifications that you make. But tuning basically adds the most power because what it does is it turns up the boost pressures that the turbocharger is producing. And so it compresses the air further and runs more PSI of boost, and that produces more power. A plug-and-play tuner for the 2.3 EcoBoost Ford Ranger is going to run you around $500, and just with the basic plug-and-play pre-installed tunes that come on it, you can add up to about 50 wheel horsepower and 70 wheel torque. Going with a simple plug-and-play handheld device is going to give you the best bang for the buck with those power gains at around $500. You can look into custom tuning or more advanced tuning options if you're really trying to maximize and optimize everything. However, that gets a good bit more expensive. And so if you're just looking for some decent power gains and other benefits of tuning, sticking with just a handheld programmable device is going to be your best bet. Now, the second modification is going to be a cold air intake. Once we have a tune on there and are running higher boost levels, it's important to bring more air to the turbocharger, which helps increase the turbocharger's efficiency and reduce the amount of stress placed on it. It also will help with air density. The increased air density further reduces stress on the turbo, but also can help lead to some small fuel economy gains. So there is a little fuel economy benefit to an upgraded intake as well. But the most important thing is bringing that additional air to the turbocharger to help support the turbocharger. Power gains aren't going to be huge from an intake. You'll see around 5 to 10 wheel horsepower when used with the tuner, but it is important to reduce the restriction that comes with the factory intake system once you start talking about higher boost levels. It's absolutely a worthwhile modification. You can get an intake system for around $300, and it's gonna help add power, but also help aid the turbocharger. Now, the third modification is going to be the downpipe. The downpipe is the first component within the exhaust system. It bolts directly up to the turbocharger, and therefore it has the greatest amount of restriction with respect to exhaust flow, and it creates the most amount of exhaust back pressure, which then acts against the turbocharger. So by opting for an upgraded downpipe, we're able to reduce exhaust back pressure, which helps improve the efficiency from the turbocharger, and it reduces your exhaust gas temperatures. And so it's good for both a reliability standpoint, but it also is extremely great for improving the turbocharger's efficiency and taking a lot of stress off of it. Now, you do have a couple options on the 2.3 EcoBoost and the Ranger. The catalytic converter sits within the downpipe, and so the best option is to go for a Catless downpipe, but that is not emissions compliant. I'd recommend keeping things compliant and sticking with a high flow downpipe. A high flow downpipe will still add about 10 to 15 wheel horsepower. It'll reduce a lot of that back pressure, which is going to help the turbocharger. And it's also going to reduce your exhaust gas temperatures, which is going to result in a healthier engine overall. The fourth modification, and quite possibly the best one from a reliability standpoint, is going to be the intercooler. The factory intercooler on the Ford Ranger is relatively small, and so it starts to get overwhelmed pretty easily once we add boost and additional modifications to the engine. You're also going to get really good power gains out of an intercooler just from the cooler air that it's going to help deliver to the engine. On the Ranger, you're going to see about 10 to 20 wheel horsepower power gains from an intercooler, but the biggest benefits aren't necessarily the power gains, but more so the reliability benefits. By sending colder air into the engine, we're going to reduce the chance of engine knock, we're going to improve timing, we're going to lower EGTs, and we're also going to help lower engine temperatures, which overall just results in a healthier and more reliable engine, which is what makes this one of the best upgrades for a reliability standpoint, especially once you have all of the other modifications that we're talking about and are running above stock power levels. So an intercooler is probably my favorite modification on this list, just because you get good power benefits and good reliability benefits out of it as well. An intercooler is probably going to run you about $600, so it is one of the more expensive upgrades on this list, but it is 100% worth it. So that covers it for our 4 modifications. We've got tuning, an intake, a high flow downpipe, and an intercooler. If you want to go a little bit further, you can upgrade the rest of the exhaust system, especially if you want a louder exhaust note. But really the big power gains are going to come from the downpipe and eliminating the restrictions within the downpipe. And so while you do get some benefits from the remainder of the exhaust system, it's not quite worth it in my mind to justify the cost of an exhaust from purely a performance standpoint. If you want the sounds, then it's great, but performance-wise, I'm gonna go ahead and pass on it just because the cost to performance balance isn't that great. All in all, these mods are gonna run you right around $2,000 and should put you at about 350 wheel horsepower and 400 wheel torque in your Ford Ranger. And those are pretty good power levels. One for a 2.3 liter motor, but also for a size truck that the Ford Ranger is. And so with these things right here, you're gonna have a lot more fun. You're gonna notice a lot more performance and power coming out of your Ford Ranger, and it's gonna make it a really fun truck to own. Anyways, guys, I hope you appreciate this content. If you do, subscribe to the channel. Please click the like button and stay tuned for our future Ford content and some of the other fun things that we do on our channel.